Welcome to Enhancing Alignment in Schools, created and narrated by yours truly, Peter Twining. This is the third video in the alignment series. If you haven't watched the previous two videos, I suggest you do that before you carry on watching this one, because they introduce some important terminology and explain the importance of alignment and explain how misalignment happens in schools. You can find both those videos on the halfbaked.education blog. Let's start with a very quick recap. In previous episodes, the key point has been that we need to get alignment between our values and beliefs, our purpose, our vision, and our mission. And I've represented that as 4 arrows like this, or sometimes I represented it with values and beliefs as an iceberg, which then underpin the purpose, vision, and mission. More recently, I've come to the conclusion that it might be better to represent it like this, with our values at the bottom, that is, the things that motivate our actions and help us make decisions, and our beliefs at the top. These are the assumptions that we hold to be true, so that we've got the values pushing up into purpose, vision, and mission, and the beliefs pushing down into purpose, vision, and mission. And of course, we need to remember that alignment is multidimensional. We need to be thinking about alignment at the country level, as well as alignment at the state or regional level, as well as alignment at the school level, as well as alignment at the level of the individual teachers. And we need to be having alignment within each level and between the levels. My focus in this episode is on getting alignment between our beliefs about how people learn and how we support that learning. So I'm focusing in on pedagogy. I'm focusing in on our pedagogical stance, that is, our beliefs about how people learn, which learning theory we believe in, and getting that aligned with our pedagogical practice, the ways in which we support learning. When I talk about pedagogical alignment, I'm making the assumption that our belief about how people learn should align with how we support that learning. In other words, our pedagogical stance should align with our pedagogical practice. Now, it's really important. I'm talking here about how we learn. I'm not talking about teaching strategies. And very many people, Guy Claxton with Learning Power and John Hattie, when he talks about learning insights, they're talking about strategies for supporting learning. They're not talking about fundamentally how learning occurs. It's a really important distinction. So I'm talking about learning theories, theories that explain how people learn. I'm drawing heavily on Patricia Murphy's innovative pedagogy framework. You can see the entire framework at the halfbaked.education website. I have simplified Patricia's framework so that we're looking at 4 different learning theories: traditional, which is a mix of behaviorist and information processing; individual constructivist, Piagetian; social constructivist, Vygotskian; and sociocultural, Levin-Wenger. And for each of these, Patricia identifies 4 themes or strands that need to be considered: the view of the learners and learning, the view of the teachers and teaching, the view of knowledge, and the view of the purpose of schooling. When I'm talking about learning theories, I'm really looking at which of these 4 theories do your beliefs about how people learn most closely align with. And we need to understand that a theory is an explanation, and each of the 4 theories we're looking at makes different assumptions about the views of learners and learning, the views of teachers and teaching, the view of knowledge, and the views of the purpose of schooling. So if you believe in one theory, for example, you believe in the traditional theory of how people learn, then you cannot also believe in the other 3 theories, because they are incompatible. They are different and contrasting explanations, and often they're quite contradictory. So you have to choose which of the 4 theories most closely aligns with your beliefs about how people learn. You can't mix and match. So you have to decide if your beliefs about how people learn aligns most closely with the traditional theory of learning, an individual constructivist theory of learning, a social constructivist theory of learning, or a socio-cultural theory of learning. You have to choose one. If you don't choose just one pedagogical stance, then you're going to be sending mixed messages to your students. Similarly, you might have identified just one theory that aligns with your beliefs about how learning happens, but that may not be aligned with your actual practice. In both cases, you're going to be causing confusion for your students. And this is really important because part of what we want students to be doing is understanding how learning happens so they become better learners. It is therefore very important that the messages we send them are consistent. Let's look at an example to illustrate the point. Let's assume that you believe in an individual constructivist theory of learning. Part of that theory says that learners are intrinsically motivated. If then within your practice, what you do is you use star charts or other forms of extrinsic rewards and competition, then you're sending them a message about extrinsic motivation being important. And that aligns with the traditional theory of learning. What you're claiming is not aligning with your practice. At this point, you've listened to me for long enough. Let's find out what your pedagogical stance actually is. If you scan this QR code or go to that URL, you'll find an activity which we've taken from the book From EdTech to PedTech, which Fiona Aubrey-Smith and I co-authored. Remember, as you're doing the activity, that there are no wrong answers, and you really need to be honest about what you really believe and which of the four theories your beliefs most closely align with. If you aren't honest with yourself, you're not going to gain much from the activity. At this point, pause the video, go to that URL, that website, and work through the activity, and then come back and restart the video when you've finished the activity. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that activity and found it stimulating, indeed challenging. I wouldn't be at all surprised if you were not consistent across the four different strands, the views of learners, the views of teachers, the views of knowledge, and the views of purpose of schooling. That's quite normal. However, as explained previously, it's far from optimal. So what can you do about it? I think the key thing is to engage in dialogue with colleagues about your beliefs about how people learn and to explore the evidence that underpins those different beliefs. And you might well find it useful to work through some of the other activities within the book From EdTech to PedTech, which would support those sorts of dialogues and really get you exploring not only what your pedagogical stance is, but also the degree of alignment between your pedagogical stance and your pedagogical practice. That concludes this third episode in the series on alignment in schools. You can find this and the other episodes on the halfbaked.education blog. I'm Peter Twining. You can contact me via LinkedIn or leave a comment below. Thank you for engaging with me, and I look forward to hearing from you.